Hello and good evening, and welcome to everybody participating in this Camden Local Plan Consultation event. My name is Brian O'Donnell from Camden's Planning Service. I'm chairing tonight's event and will shortly be introducing you to the team we have from the Council this evening. This is the second of 3 events about the draft new local plan. This one will focus on inclusive economy, town centres, communities, infrastructure and transport. Last week, we had the first session, which gave an overview of the plan and covered housing and site allocations. And next Tuesday, the 13th of February, we'll have the final event, which will be on climate change, the environment, and design. For this event, we'll have a presentation in 4 parts, and after each part, we'll have questions to the team. We expect that the event will last between 45 and 90 minutes, depending on the number of questions that we have. You can ask as many questions as you like, but please keep them short and direct so the team can answer them in the best manner possible. There are 2 ways to ask questions. If you're registered to attend this event, the best way is to submit questions in the box below the video, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can submit questions on the text-only page. After this event, we'd like you to comment and share your views on the draft local plan. You can do this on our Commonplace consultation website, and we'll be emailing all those who've registered today the link to that. Or you can do a web search for Camden Local Plan Commonplace. You can also comment by emailing planningpolicy@camden.gov.uk. So now I'll introduce the team members who are taking part today. Firstly, we have Rebecca. Please, can you introduce yourself, Rebecca?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rebecca Burden, and I'm the Development Plans Manager in the Planning Policy team.
Thank you, Rebecca. We also have Andrew. Andrew, please, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Andrew Triggs. I'm in the Planning Policy team at Camden.
Thank you. And finally, we have Patrick.
Hi, I'm Patrick Jones. I'm the Business Growth Manager in the Inclusive Economy team.
Great, thank you. So now it's time for me to hand over to Rebecca, who will start the first part of the presentation, which is a brief overview of the local plan review. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Brian. So tonight's presentation, as Brian has said, we'll start with a brief introduction of the local plan review. Following that, I'll hand straight over to Andrew, who will give a presentation on the inclusive economy policies within the local plan. Following that, we'll break for questions, and then I'll do a presentation on the supporting Camden's communities chapter in the plan, following which we'll break for questions again, and then there'll be a final presentation on transport and infrastructure policies. The National Planning Policy Framework sets a requirement for local authorities to review and update their plans every 5 years. The decision was taken in 2022 to commence a review of the current local plan to ensure that the council continues to have robust and up-to-date planning policies that will deliver the council's priorities. The purpose of the review has been to update our policies where needed and to consider where new policies are required. To inform the plan, we held a call for views in 2022 and early 2023, and we've also commissioned a number of updates to our evidence base, and all of the studies that we've prepared to support the local plan to date are available to view on our website. The local plan also incorporates the site allocations from the draft site allocations local plan that we consulted upon in 2020 and again in late 2021, 2022. The draft covers a number of different areas, including vision and objectives. It sets out the overall development strategy for Camden. It contains a number of area policies and site allocations, and then it also contains a number of more topic-based policies covering housing, climate change, local economy in town centres, communities, the natural environment, design and amenity, delivery and monitoring. The draft plan is published for public consultation for a period of 8 weeks until the 13th of March 2024. So you can share your views on the draft new local plan with us in a number of different ways. So we have our Commonplace site, where you can go and have a look at the digital interactive version of the plan. And underneath each policy, there is a comment box for you to be able to share your views directly through our Commonplace site. The plan is also available to view as a PDF on our website if you'd prefer to download it. And also you can email comments to us then to the planning policy email address, which is on your screen. We're also holding a number of public engagement sessions, as Brian has mentioned, with the final session to be held next Tuesday. And all of these events that we're holding are hosted on the local plan consultation portal, which you can also access through our website. And we'll be putting the recording of today's meeting up there too. And if you didn't get to attend the one that we held last week, you can view that online as well. In terms of next steps, as I said, the consultation closes on the 13th of March. Following this, officers will be reviewing all of the comments submitted and updating the policies in the plan where needed. The updated draft local plan will then be published for a further round of consultation at the end of 2024. And then following this, the plan will be submitted to the Planning Inspectorate for public examination in 2025, with the aim of then adopting a new local plan in 2026. I'll now pass over to Andrew, who will introduce the inclusive economy chapter of the local plan.
Thank you, Rebecca. So the term inclusive economy, what does it actually mean? So when we're talking about an inclusive economy, we're talking about an economy that works for everyone, where no one is left behind, and where everybody has a sense that they're able to contribute towards the economy and share in the success of the economy and the growth of the borough. Now, in terms of the local plan policy, in terms of the local plan chapter, we've got a number of policies which you can see in front of you. An overarching successful and inclusive economy policy, a policy focused on offices, an industry policy, one focusing in on the provision of affordable workspace. There's also a policy in the plan which deals specifically with the Hatton Garden area. There are also policies dealing with high streets and shopping, gambling related uses, hot food takeaways, and also delivery led food businesses, which are sometimes referred to as dark kitchens. Next slide, please. So the call for views that Rebecca was referring to just a moment ago, the main issues that were raised that were relevant to inclusive economy matters by consultees. First of all, that the plan should support provision of on-site childcare facilities, and it should also help facilitate co-working spaces. That the plan should also respond to changes in demand for office floor space to shift towards more hybrid and remote working. The plan should also support bringing forward alternative uses for redundant office spaces, particularly housing. The plan should set out what it aims to do in terms of employment and training opportunities, including apprenticeships, and also should stipulate that apprenticeships should be accessible for people of any age. The plan should be clear in terms of what the requirements in the borough are for affordable workspace, percentage, discount, number of years, and so on that it should be provided for. The plan needs to be thinking about cross-boundary matters and joint working. For instance, Kilburn Town Centre, Kilburn High Road. The plan needs to be able to support the revitalisation of all of our centres. Should be thinking about how we might address issues of vacancy within town centres. Maybe we should be considering meanwhile uses, providing a supportive framework for specialist clusters of businesses, such as life sciences, such as research-based enterprises, and also give greater emphasis to supporting arts and cultural activities. Next slide, please. So, as Rebecca was mentioning just a moment ago, the local plan is not being developed in a vacuum. There are lots of various drivers in terms of evidence, data, strategies, and policies that feed into it. The most notable ones are the We Make Camden document, which is the shared community and corporate vision, and which includes objectives and missions for the borough. The economic needs assessment, which is a piece of dedicated analysis which looked into office and industrial floor space needs in the borough. There's an affordable workspace strategy that has been developed, which looks at how the council can support greater delivery of affordable workspace throughout the borough. KQ 2050, that refers to the Knowledge Quarter in and around Euston and King's Cross, and how that area and the relevant sectors operating within it, research, education, culture, life sciences, how they can be supported over the coming years. A retail and high street needs assessment. So that was very much focusing in on looking at what the capacity is for additional retail floor space in the borough, and it also updated health checks that we had, looking at how our individual town centres of all different sizes and neighbourhood centres are performing. The Future High Streets Prospectus, which is a vision and objectives in terms of renewing and revitalising, energising high streets in different localities in the borough. There's an emerging evening and nighttime economy strategy, which looks at how we can support a wider range of uses and make the evening and nighttime more inclusive, particularly in those parts of the borough where those evening uses predominate, such as Camden Town and also parts of central London. There's public health evidence that feeds into the local plan, including specific advice prepared by public health officers looking at the impacts of gambling related uses, and also the impacts on of hot food takeaways on being able to maintain a healthy food environment. And sitting above all of this as well is the London Plan 2021, which is the overarching strategic development plan for the whole of London. Our policies need to be in general conformity with what is set out in the London Plan, which means we generally need to be consistent with what the London Plan is aiming to achieve. Next slide, please. So this summarises sort of some of the key issues in terms that we were grappling with in developing our policy approach. So first and foremost is making sure that we respond to those drivers I mentioned within We Make Camden, being clearer about what our expectations are around affordable workspace delivery, and the benefits that we're seeking from developments. Thinking about how we deal with offices where they are genuinely obsolete. There's no continuing demand for the office space. Maybe the offices are particularly poor quality, and maybe there's been a marketing exercise that has demonstrated there's no demand. So thinking about what we can do to actually repurpose the space for housing, but also thinking about continuing economic needs in terms of supporting small and medium-sized enterprises, and also creative industries, which in some cases may be able to use some of this space. The plan also, and the policies also, respond to the opportunity provided by a number of very, very large industrial sites within the borough, which to an extent are underutilised and potentially can provide wider planning benefits. Within town centres, the plan sets out clear expectations for keeping active ground floor uses. What we mean by that are uses accessed by members of the public, passers-by, and also supporting a wider range of town centre uses, which might be cultural uses, community uses, affordable workspace. It might be sharing economy uses such as repair shops, a whole range of different things. So how we can support greater diversity in town centres where that is appropriate. Responding to the issues around gambling related harms. So some of the evidence from public health that I mentioned a moment ago demonstrates that the greatest numbers of gambling premises tend to be in those areas of the borough with higher levels of deprivation. So it is a big public health concern. Also, the plan seeks to do what it can in terms of supporting the vibrant and diverse arts and cultural institutions and uses in the borough. And as I mentioned, there's an evening and nighttime economy strategy, which is looking at widening the range of uses and activities that people are able to access and enjoy in the evening and at night, and also ensuring that there is more essentially for people, particularly who communities who are not going into town centres or using nighttime facilities and services, perhaps because they don't feel welcome, perhaps they don't feel safe, and what we can do to make it a more mixed offer. And also thinking about night shift workers, where it's reported that many night shift workers can struggle to even access basic services and facilities at night. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the sort of key issues that we're trying to respond to as part of the inclusive economy chapter in the local plan. The key aspects of the policy approach. Firstly, we're expecting major schemes to contribute towards the provision of affordable workspace, subject to a lower threshold applying in Hatton Garden. We would, as a starting point, expect developments to contribute around 20% of the floor space to be provided at rents 50% of the market rent, so 50% discount, and as a guideline for a minimum of 15 years. Our preference is for this affordable workspace to be delivered on site, but we will allow flexibility for off-site provision in some instances. And also we will look at pooling affordable workspace contributions to contribute to the delivery of affordable workspace in other parts of the borough, particularly some of those areas where we don't tend to see such sort of large developments. And so we need to be thinking about how we can ensure that affordable workspace is delivered where it is most needed. Also, I mentioned earlier about the consultation comments on childcare facilities. So we specifically promote overcoming some of the barriers to work and encourage the provision of creches. And in terms of new office provision, we say that that should be focused within central London, town centres commensurate with the scale of the office use. And we've also identified a number of specific sites that potentially can provide new office floor space. Next slide, please. I mentioned there can be circumstances where it's been demonstrated that offices are to all intents and purposes, obsolete, where there's no longer any continuing demand. There's also the challenge in terms of tighter environmental standards, which land owners will be required to meet, particularly EPC ratings, whereby offices have to meet certain criteria in terms of their energy efficiency, or the implication is the floor space may not potentially be able to be let. So where office space is ultimately released after the council has accepted the justification being provided by the applicant, then we would look for at least 50% of the floor space to be provided as housing. That's in line with the mixed use approach that we've had in central London, which is being extended out to other locations as part of the new local plan. We've also identified the importance of boosting the supply of smaller and low cost space within the borough, particularly for the creative industries. There's over 10,000 creative enterprises in Camden. Nearly 90% of those are micro businesses employing 1 to 9 people. And we also want to be able to support the circular and low carbon economy. So thinking about things such as retrofit of homes and offices, construction trades, repair shops, upcycling, and also giving a greater support for local supply chains, and also sustainable transport, micro consolidation, which means basically a shift towards last mile deliveries by cargo bikes or electric vans, rather than moving goods and freight by large vehicles. And lastly, we seek to manage and protect the supply of industrial lands. Our evidence shows that Camden has a limited supply of industrial land of around 35 hectares, but recognise that some of the larger sites, there is the potential for comprehensive mixed use development to come forward, which intensifies the employment uses, whilst also delivering other local plan objectives, such as the provision of permanent self-contained housing. And we've identified the particular sites to which this applies in our site allocations. The next slide, please. I mentioned in terms of town centres that we have a significant number. They each have their own character, role, and function. They have different potential and opportunities in terms of being able to accommodate development. We have got detailed descriptions for each of our centres. We've done the health check work as part of the retail study. So there's a lot of information that can feed into individual development proposals to make sure that we are responding to the needs and opportunities in each of our centres. However, our policies have been updated to reflect changes in national policy. It's no longer enforceable in England to apply the detailed frontage controls following the introduction of use class E. And what this means is there's a number of different land uses where we could control, for instance, a scheme from a cafe to retail may have required planning permission, whereas a number of different uses have now been brought under this class E umbrella, meaning that changes between these uses don't constitute development, and therefore planning permission is no longer required. I mentioned earlier we're supporting a wider range of town centre uses. I've also mentioned about the support we're trying to provide to widen out the uses and activities available at evening and night. In terms of dark kitchens or delivery-led food businesses, we're trying to steer those to the most appropriate locations in the borough, which would seem to be larger employment sites, or certainly trying to achieve separation away from predominantly residential areas. And the plan also includes caps and controls on gambling-related uses, and also on hot food takeaways. Next slide, please. Oh, any questions? Over to you, Brian.
Apologies, everybody. I think that Brian might be having a few connection issues, so I'll ask the questions, Andrew. So the first question that we've had tonight is for Patrick, and the question is: high commercial premises are pricing out many independent and community businesses from Camden's town centres, which can make them less expensive. How can the new Camden plan help to tackle this problem?
Thanks, Rebecca. So I think it's worth saying that we've got a lot of neighbourhood plans in the borough which already emphasise the value of retaining smaller spaces. So there is recognition there, smaller spaces that support independence particularly. I mean, in Andrew's summary, he mentioned the affordable workspace strategy and the affordable workspace policy. And so there's a policy and a strategy in place to create affordable space within new development, and often we seek to secure those rents that support small businesses, local businesses, to bring them into new markets and new opportunities like that. One thing the affordable workspace strategy talks about is also about thinking more broadly about what kinds of spaces. Though typically we've looked at office and workshop space, but can we think broader than that and look at retail? Can we look at market space or lab space particularly? So there's something in the local plan there which hopefully will have an impact. We're also supporting meanwhile uses on high streets. Again, low cost, low entry spaces that can be tied in with regeneration schemes. Generally, we try and resist the amalgamation of smaller units, especially where they're part of the local character of the economic centre or the place or the economy within it. And smaller spaces typically are more suitable, more affordable for smaller independent businesses, local businesses. And it's worth also mentioning we've had a long-standing policy support in the Hatton Garden area, for example, which has been about protecting the jewellery industry. That's kind of the kind of key things I was thinking about in relation to that one.
Thank you, Patrick. That's really helpful. The second question that we've had is also for Patrick, if that's okay. And the question is, on paragraph 9.22, the meanwhile use should respond to local needs and priorities and be offered at low cost. Some valuable community groups have very limited funds. Could this be low/no cost? Also, some developers are resistant to meanwhile uses. Should the text on meanwhile use be stronger to help overcome this resistance?
I looked at that one. I think that, I mean, there always is a cost, so it's never no cost. There's a cost to somebody somewhere, and it really depends on the site and the developer. But I maybe there's scope to go away and look at the wording just to see if we can expand on that a bit. I'm not really sure what else to say on that. I think it already talks about there being, responding to local need, and really it will be a case-by-case basis that we look at it. Meanwhile uses will present where there's a time delays or market failure. So yeah,
I would have thought as well, Rebecca, there's more scope certainly on some of the larger developments where they're being delivered across perhaps a number of phases. It might be more viable to offer a greater level of discount in terms of the actual rents.
Thank you, Andrew. So the next question we've had is actually for Andrew now. And the question is, what are you doing to help our high streets given increasing levels of vacancy?
Okay, I would say there's sort of multiple interventions which are being developed by the council, both through the local plan, but also through its sort of wider actions outside of planning. I suppose one of the most critical things, sort of start getting back to sort of basics in terms of what planning can do. Section 106 agreements and planning obligations help provide funding to support local infrastructure, which can include improving public realm in terms of greater greening, a sort of healthier sort of environment in which to spend time. It can also help fund, provide contributions towards walking and cycling facilities. The meanwhile uses is obviously sort of a key intervention in terms of supporting high streets. The council also brought forward a number of planning frameworks for key areas of the borough, some of which do overlap with some of our town centres, such as the Camden Goodyard planning framework. There's also another one for West End Lane and Finchley Road, which includes the Finchley Road and part of the Finchley Road and Swiss Cottage town centre. And what these planning frameworks do, the supplementary planning document, is it sets out a whole range of possible interventions, both through planning and beyond, to support and enhance high streets. So I think that in a nutshell, there's some of the sort of key things which we're doing. And also there are some site allocations in the local plan as well, which are specific to individual sites within town centres and sets out how they can be improved and provide better uses, including retail floor space in some cases.
Thank you, Andrew. And thank you.
Hello, Brian.
Thank you, Rebecca, for taking over while I had a few technical issues. Apologies.
Can I just, so I don't know if you can hear me, can I just add to Andrew's excellent response? I mean, I guess it's outside the local plan, but we have introduced something called an Article 4 direction, which removes the ability of vital high street premises to be lost to residential without the need of the planning permission. So I think that's quite an important tool, because without that tool, our local plan policies would be less effective. And we've also got dedicated policies in our draft local plan, which seek to control the proliferation of betting shops and crucially also hot food takeaways, which obviously can, too many of those uses in our high street can affect their vitality and viability. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. The next question is also for Andrew. It is, on the principal loss of offices through changes to EPC, what evidence is expected to provide this? i.e., will it be an economic statement? And at what stage in the local plan development will you accept this approach? i.e., will it be at the point of adoption or sooner? Finally, is it definitive that self-contained housing would be required if the principle of loss of office is agreed, or is this a preference but other land uses would be considered?
There's sort of two questions in one there. I think probably I'll try and deal with the first one. I mean, in terms of the evidence we've got on EPCs, there's not a significant number of offices that potentially fail to meet the standards right now, but the particular challenge is around the tightening up towards EPC C, I think, in 2027, and then EPC B in 2030. And what this means is potentially quite a lot of office buildings within Camden potentially will have difficulty in meeting those standards without intervention, which means investment in terms of refurbishment and improvements to the built fabric and servicing of the buildings, perhaps new ventilation systems, new heating systems, better glazing, and so on. Now that's going to be a challenge for some landowners more than others. What is not completely clear at the moment is in terms of what wider grants or financial support might be available to landowners as those standards begin to bite. It also is, I think, quite unclear in terms of what exemptions might apply. From what I've been reading, it may be the case that some heritage buildings don't need to necessarily meet those standards because it's not feasible for them to do so. There may also be exemptions around cost effectiveness, where it's just simply not viable to upgrade certain types or age of buildings. I think we'll have to see. Now, in terms of what the local plan says, is it could be a factor in rendering a office building obsolete. We say that where it's been demonstrated that it's not cost effective to undertake those refurbishment works, which I mentioned examples of, then we would potentially look to release the offices for housing. But as mentioned, that would need to be demonstrated through submission of viability evidence, which potentially would need to be independently assessed or verified by colleagues within the council. So it potentially is a challenge where a viability statement is submitted to the council, and that demonstrates that it's not cost effective to refurbish the offices to meet those EPC standards. Then potentially we will not be requiring submission of the full marketing exercise that we would normally do. So there is some additional flexibility there for where that EPC issue cannot be overcome. Sorry, Brian, the second question in terms of, I think it was about alternative uses and housing you mentioned.
Would you like me to repeat it, Andrew?
Please, sorry.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Is it definitive that self-contained housing would be required if the principle of the loss of an office is agreed, or is this a preference but other land uses would be considered?
I think it's more of a preference. It's essentially a priority in the local plan. We have our mixed use policy, which is tried and tested and has existed in central London for many years, where we seek to deliver additional permanent self-contained housing to ensure mixed and balanced communities. It's a priority use in the local plan. We're also having a huge challenge at the moment in terms of being able to demonstrate a housing supply in Camden, particularly around the housing delivery test. So it is a preference, but it is also a priority, and we would look to seek housing on these sites where the offices have it's been demonstrated as no longer continuing demand, or the offices are no longer suitable, or there's some other constraints as to why they can't continue to remain in an employment use. However, having said that, there is a break essentially in the local plan that says where offices are 4,000 square meters or more, so we're talking about multi-story office buildings, mainly in central London, could potentially be outside central London, I guess, if you've got a large office building, then we would look not only for a contribution towards housing, that 50% that I mentioned, but additionally we would also look to retain some employment use on site, particularly affordable workspace, which Patrick mentioned earlier, and that could theoretically be delivered at ground floor.
Great, thank you, Andrew. We have a question about nighttime economy, which I'm going to direct to Patrick. How will the new local plan reflect Camden's proposals to extend our borough's nighttime economy? What will be the impact on our town centres, communities, infrastructure and transport? Creating a more inclusive economy sounds exciting. How will this aim be affected by the proposals on the nighttime economy?
Thanks, Brian. Sorry, I can so you might need to reread the second part of that question when I get to it. So obviously in policy IE6, which I think is the town centre policy, it does say that you want to widen the range of evening and nighttime uses, especially where they support local residents, amenity and night shifts, people in favour of the way people work. And I think that's around how their working conditions are met. Andrew mentioned in his introduction that we do have a strategy in development, and I guess the two will be read alongside. That strategy talks about inclusion. So, how can we bring a diverse range of audiences into evening, nighttime economy, from families, more non-alcohol-led activity, but also through to protecting the loss of venues that cater to people with special characteristics, particularly LGBTQ plus venues, where we've seen quite a lot of loss in the recent years. Talks about measures to kind of promote collaboration, promote cultural production in town in our evening and nighttime economy, and as well as kind of supporting businesses to grow. So I think it's the way that the policy reads alongside the strategy. So could you go with the second part of that question?
Yeah, no problem. Creating a more inclusive economy sounds exciting. How will this aim be affected by the proposals on the nighttime economy?
I think particularly the way we are providing better support for night workers, for example. It's an area where we have about a third of the borough's workforce working between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. and their working conditions quite often is low paid. They don't have anywhere near the same level of in-work benefits and support, management support, personal development support. So the council has a fairly well-developed service to support people in work, support people into work, and we want to try and expand that and work with employers in particularly dense or sectors where it's particularly dense with night work. So you're looking at care, hospitality, leisure, obviously, health services, that sort of thing. So I think that's one area where the strategy can really help is supporting kind of people's well-being lifestyles. And the strategy also talks about well-being. So there are actions around how can we create more opportunity for people to be physically active, culturally enriched, those sorts of things.
Great, thank you, Patrick. We don't have any further questions on the inclusive economy. So now I'm going to hand over to Rebecca for the next part of the presentation, which is on supporting Camden's communities.
Thank you, Brian. So my presentation tonight is going to talk you through the Supporting Camden's Communities chapter in the new local plan. So as part of the call for views that we held at the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, a number of common themes were raised as part of that initial consultation, including the need to consider the wider determinants of health, for example, the impact that housing or access to work, access to open space, things like that, the impacts that they have on health, and aim to reduce health inequalities. Another key theme was around the need to ensure that we're planning for future generations and that Camden needs to be family friendly. Developers should contribute towards additional social and community infrastructure was a key point that came out, obviously to kind of meet the needs generated by new developments and cater for those new populations within Camden. There was the need to recognise the continued role that public houses play in the local economy and their role in promoting social diversity as well and meeting the needs of different groups and communities within Camden. Another key issue that was raised was obviously the need to ensure that developments include public toilets to ensure that they're inclusive and accessible. And also, it's really important to promote and protect open spaces within Camden. So in terms of the key issues that were raised as part of the consultation, so one of the key issues was the need to align the local plan with the ambitions and priorities set out in We Make Camden, the need to support the delivery of the Camden Health and Wellbeing strategy, the need to ensure that community facilities are designed to be inclusive and accessible to meet the needs of Camden's communities. The design and management of open space has been another key consideration for us when we've been looking at updating our policies, supporting the council's food mission, and you'll see in this chapter that we've introduced a new policy on community food growing. Also securing contributions to help fund community art projects, and also refreshing our evidence to reflect infrastructure providers' priorities, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. So the Supporting Communities chapter includes a number of different policies which set out our approach to improving health and wellbeing, protecting and enhancing social and community infrastructure, protecting and enhancing open space, promoting food growing, protecting and enhancing cultural facilities, and also protecting and enhancing public houses. In terms of the overall approach taken within the chapter, to give an overview of the policy approach proposed in the local plan. So we have updated the health and wellbeing policy to emphasise the need for development to be designed to promote good health and wellbeing, and obviously to minimise the adverse impacts on health and wellbeing and reduce health inequalities. We've strengthened the requirement for health impact assessments within the plan, and these should be undertaken for major developments and for developments that give rise to significant adverse health impacts. We've updated the social and community infrastructure policy to provide clearer guidance in relation to our expectations for the design of new community facilities to ensure that they are inclusive and accessible to meet the needs of the communities that they serve. And also our overall approach, however, to the protection of existing and the provision of new social and community infrastructure remains unchanged, however. So continuing on in terms of our proposed policy approach, so we've updated the open space policy to provide additional guidance in relation to the design and management of public open spaces. However, again, our overall approach to protecting existing open spaces and also the provision and enhancement of new open spaces remains unchanged, along with our open space standards. To support the delivery of the council's food mission, we've included a new policy on food growing, which sets out our approach for supporting food growing and community food growing in new development schemes within Camden. We're also continuing to protect existing cultural facilities and seeking the provision of new cultural facilities too. We'll also now seek contributions from developments to help fund community arts projects. In addition to this, we are also continuing with our current approach to protecting public houses, which are of value and obviously resisting their change of use. And new pubs are also supported through the plan in appropriate locations.
Okay.
Happy to take questions now.
Thank you, Rebecca. I have a couple of questions on that section. First one will be for you. You mentioned about health impact assessments. Can you tell us what is a health impact assessment?
Thank you, Brian. So a health impact assessment is a useful tool that helps ensure that health and wellbeing is properly considered as part of the planning process. And basically, the main aim of it is to ensure that the positive health impacts of a development are maximised, and that obviously the impact on the kind of the social determinants of health, for example, as I've said, like housing and employment and things like that, are considered through the health impact assessment to ensure that any health impacts are minimised, and all the health benefits of the development are kind of maximised as far as possible.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. The next question, I think, is one for Andrew about open space. We need more open spaces in Camden. What is the council doing about this?
Okay, so within Camden, there's obviously the challenge that a lot of our development sites are already fully built on. So we do identify in terms of our site allocations where there are particular opportunities to deliver new public open space on site. We have an established approach in terms of seeking developer contributions towards enhancements and upgrades of existing parks and amenity land within the vicinity or close to a development. I suppose more broadly, the local plan very much does promote greater greening, including things such as roof gardens, in terms of them being a key opportunity in terms of increasing access to open space. But I mean, it is a tricky one. But every year, developments in Camden, through planning contributions, through the obligations I mentioned earlier, do contribute significantly towards improvements of existing green spaces, and also in terms of innovative approaches, such as part of the West End project, which involves creation of a number of new open spaces, including the first new public park in Camden in very many years in Elfrid Place, which involved the repurposing of an existing highway. So the things you can do like that, and very small pocket parks as well, as part of a greening of the public realm.
Thank you, Andrew. That's all the questions that we have on that topic. So now we're going to move on to the final part of the presentation, which is back to Rebecca and on transport and infrastructure.
Thank you, Brian. So the last presentation tonight focuses on the transport policies within the draft new local plan, and also infrastructure too. So in terms of the main issues that were raised during the consultation in relation to transport, so a number of common themes were raised. So one was around the kind of support for the current approach in the existing local plan to prioritise sustainable modes of transport. Another main issue was around the need to use more inclusive language in the plan, recognising that people move around in different ways. There's the need for greater investment in transport infrastructure was a key issue that was raised as well. And alongside this, the need for step-free access to be provided at stations in Camden. Another key point was around the greater provision of electric vehicle charging points, and also the need for increased highways greening as well. And finally, another issue raised was around the need to promote the sustainable movement of freight, and with this kind of support more sustainable modes of transport, for example, the use of cargo bikes or electric vehicles to move freight to. In terms of the key issues that we've looked at and taken into consideration when updating the transport strategy, one of these was obviously the need to align the local plan with the priorities set out in the council's transport strategy, and in addition to this, the Clean Air Action Plan that the council has produced and the council's Climate Change Action Plan too. We've looked at how we can align with the Mayor's Healthy Streets guidance, and also looked at how our policies can help to create safer, more accessible and inclusive streets and public spaces. Another key thing has been looking at how we can promote the delivery of public realm improvements, sustainable movement of goods and services, and particularly looking at our policy approach around last mile delivery, and also looking at providing high quality and attractive and sustainable travel options to help communities access jobs and services and leisure facilities too. Another aim has been looking at how we can support the delivery of net zero in terms of the council's climate change ambitions, and also obviously how our transport policies can contribute towards improving local air quality too. And finally, we've also obviously recognising the health benefits associated with active travel as well, and looking at that in relation to our policy approach, particularly around prioritising kind of walking and cycling too. So the transport chapter in the plan includes a number of different policies which seek to address the following issues, including safe, healthy and sustainable transport, minimising the need to travel, prioritising walking, wheeling and cycling, looking at obviously policies around public transport, shared transport infrastructure and services, parking and car-free development, and also the sustainable movement of goods and services and materials. So to give a brief overview of the policy approach proposed in the local plan, so we've included a new policy in the plan which sets out our overarching strategy for prioritising the delivery of safe, active, healthy, affordable and sustainable transport in line with the council's transport strategy. We've updated the policy on walking and cycling to also include wheeling, to ensure that new development also seeks to meet the needs of disabled people. And here the term wheeling is advocated very much by the charity Wheels for Wellbeing, and encompasses wheeled mobilities, including the use of wheelchairs, mobility scooters as well. We've included a requirement for streets to be designed in line with the Mayor's Healthy Streets approach, with a greater emphasis on highway screening. And we've also updated the public transport policy to emphasise the need for the delivery of step-free access at stations. And here contributions will be sought from major developments to assist with the delivery of this. We've also included a new policy to support the delivery of shared transport infrastructure and services, for example, car clubs, bike hire, cargo bikes and things like that. And we've amended the sustainable movement of goods policy to minimise the impact of freight and servicing trips through measures such as looking at how we can provide on-site servicing facilities, and also the ensuring that deliveries are timed outside of peak hours. So in terms of looking at infrastructure delivery in the plan and the approach that we've taken to that, so infrastructure delivery is obviously a key theme that runs throughout the draft new local plan, and we've touched upon it today in relation to obviously kind of things like open space provision, community facilities, cultural facilities, and also looking at transport infrastructure. But in terms of the kind of the policies in the plan, one of the key policies which obviously sets out our approach to prioritising infrastructure provision is the delivery and monitoring policy. And this sets out how we will work with our partners, so other key stakeholders, to help deliver the plan, and ensure obviously that the necessary infrastructure is provided to support communities. It sets out how we'll make use of planning obligations, so those secured through kind of Section 106 agreements, and also how we'll use the funds collected through the community infrastructure levy as well to obviously help fund new infrastructure within Camden, and also sets out how we'll monitor the delivery of the plan and monitor the delivery of kind of the infrastructure needed as well. So the existing local plan has an infrastructure schedule in Appendix 1, and we've updated that as part of the process of reviewing the local plan to ensure that the infrastructure schedule that's now in the Appendix 1 of the draft new local plan also reflects the Council's priorities over the plan period to 2041. And in addition to obviously setting our infrastructure priorities out there, we also set out the priorities for each of the different areas that we've kind of identified within Camden, within the area-based policies for the south, central, west and northern areas of Camden, and they're set out kind of right at the front of the plan. And in addition to this, we're also producing an infrastructure delivery plan to support the new local plan and ensure that the infrastructure needed in obviously response to new development is provided to support both kind of existing and new local communities. I'm happy to take any questions now.
Great. Thank you very much, Rebecca. So moving on to questions, you mentioned in the presentation about the Mayor's Healthy Street approach. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I suppose the aim of the Healthy Streets approach is to look at reducing traffic, reducing pollution and kind of noise pollution as well, looking at creating more attractive and accessible and people-friendly streets where people can enjoy spending time and kind of and instead of just kind of passing through, and also being kind of physically active, and ultimately looking at how we can kind of improve people's health by making our streets greener, making them feel safer, so people will choose to kind of to walk and cycle or use public transport rather than getting in their car.
Great, thank you very much. And I think we have one more question, which I think is one for Andrew. I think we've got another. Seems we have an extra question, but I'll ask this one to Andrew. There's increasing evidence about the health benefits of being in contact with nature. The Council's commitment to nature recovery networks is welcome. Does the reference to public open space include green spaces and sites of importance for nature conservation?
Okay, so I suppose there's a couple of elements to that. So in terms of a nature recovery network, a sort of key component of that are what are called designated sites. So in Camden, they tend to be called sites of importance for nature conservation. We seek to safeguard those sites for our planning policies. Now, the nature recovery network is kind of like taking it a sort of stage further in terms of providing greater connectivity for wildlife to sort of move through the landscape in terms of additional green corridors. We've already got some corridors such as railway embankments in Camden, which have a degree of protection. Some of them are sinks themselves, but there is the opportunity to expand and build on that, and that is something that is promoted as part of our planning policies in terms of supporting the nature recovery network. Now, I believe that is being developed gradually by our nature conservation colleagues, and the local plan will have an important role in terms of helping to deliver that for wildlife, and also in terms of the benefits for people as mentioned, in terms of greater access to nature, contact with nature. We have a number of what are called local nature sites in nature reserves in Camden as well. Again, all of those are also sinks and are protected and are important in terms of providing opportunity for people to volunteer in terms of supporting wildlife, also school and educational activities as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Andrew. I thought that was the last question, but another one has popped into my screen. So I think Dan is going to be able to help us out with this one. So what real powers will the plan have to deliver step-free access? For example, none of the stations in Kentish Town have step-free access, yet Kentish Town Tube Station is closed for a year while new escalators are installed, and will still not provide step-free access when it reopens. The council seem powerless to persuade TfL otherwise. How will the local plan give the council more influence?
Yeah, thanks for that, Brian. I mean, first to say, step-free access at Kentish Town Station is identified as a priority in Camden's transport strategy, alongside other stations such as West Hampstead and Holborn as well. And also Kentish Town, it's identified as a priority in the Kentish Town framework as well, which is adopted as part of the, well, adopted as supplementary to the local plan. We are working, for example, on achieving step-free access at West Hampstead Station. And that's a really good example, actually, of how our plans and frameworks can help deliver step-free. So in that instance, we secured Section 106 funding. Well, we will secure Section 106 funding from the developer of the O2 site towards step-free access at West Hampstead Station. And there's also the potential to supplement that with some community infrastructure levy as well. So yeah, so hopefully, you know, as that development progresses, we can make progress with Transport for London on that. And I guess to some extent at Kentish Town, there is similar potential there because we have, you know, it's a growth area. We have the Regis Road and Murphy's developments as site allocations, and they will generate significant amounts of community infrastructure levy. And there's also potential there to secure Section 106, although I always have to caution with Section 106, it does need to be related to the impact of the development. Yeah, but certainly I think the planning process is probably one of the main ways of helping achieve step-free access. And there's an infrastructure, I think Andrew can confirm this, there's an infrastructure list in the back of the local plan which will include step-free access at Kentish Town.
There is, that is definitely mentioned. Can I just add on as well that the priority for step-free access in Kentish Town is mentioned in the Kentish Town neighbourhood plan. And one thing I didn't mention a moment ago is in terms of the nature recovery networks, neighbourhood planning has potentially quite an important role in terms of setting out possible opportunities to join up some of those corridors and gaps in terms of wildlife connectivity.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Dan. So that's the last of the questions that we have received tonight. So I'd like to draw this session to a close. Thank you to everybody watching for taking the time to join us tonight. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. And thanks to Rebecca, Andrew, Patrick, and Dan for their presentations and answers. As I mentioned earlier, we're keen to hear your views on what we've been discussing today and on any other part of the draft local plan. As I said, you can comment on our Commonplace website, and we'll very shortly be sending an email with the link to all those who have registered. And you can also comment by emailing planningpolicy@camden.gov.uk. Consultation on the draft local plan closes on Wednesday, the 13th of March, so you still have over a month to provide comments, and we'll consider all the responses received when we prepare the next version of the plan. This event has been recorded and will be on the website in the next few days. We'll send an email to all those who registered, letting them know when it's uploaded. All the questions will be available and timestamped, so it's easy just to watch the sections that are of most interest to you. The recordings will also have subtitles, so you can turn them on and off as you wish. Before we finish, just a final reminder that there's one more Camden Local Plan consultation event to come. That's next Tuesday, 13th of February, when we'll be covering climate change, the environment, and design. That brings us to the end of tonight's session. So from all of us here, thank you, and we hope you have a very good evening. Good night.